best. It's Monday here on The Story, and tonight, could Oregon's bottle bill face even more changes? How wildfire efforts are playing a role in the latest idea. Plus, 3 congresswomen make a surprise visit to the ICE facility in Tacoma, including Maxine Dexter. Their takeaways after spending 2 hours inside. But first, there's less than a month left in Oregon's legislative session, and we still don't have a transportation funding package. But a recent memo gave us a hint at what lawmakers could be considering. That's caused all kinds of controversy in the past. And it's our big story tonight. Well, this is a live look at the Capitol in Salem as lawmakers are heading into the final month of this year's legislative session. They have until June 29th to wrap things up, and that includes one of the biggest priorities for this session, passing a new statewide transportation package. The Oregon Department of Transportation has been sounding the alarm about its financial woes for years. The goal this session is to basically overhaul how transportation is funded in Oregon. No small task. And while the development of the package has been ongoing, so far there's no publicly released bill or package of bills to meet that goal. And the clock is ticking. The task of getting the package together falls on the Joint Transportation Committee. But lawmakers have gotten creative, we'll call it, with the process. You're looking at a meeting of the Joint Committee on Transportation Reinvestment. Same members as the Joint Transportation Committee, but with that new fancy name. Now, the new, air quotes, new committee was created last month. Why? Because it does not have the same internal deadlines for moving legislation, a legislative loophole, if you will. But despite those shenanigans, we have gotten some hints about the transportation funding package taking shape. They released a conceptual plan about 2 months ago that we told you about. The plan then was to raise nearly $2 billion every 2 years by hiking the gas tax along with just about every other car-related tax or fee you can think of, and adding some new ones like a pay-per-mile fee. Now, most of the money would go into the State Highway Fund, which is doled out to ODOT and local transportation agencies to pay for core operations and road maintenance. A smaller portion of the revenue would be set aside for big road projects like the Rose Quarter I-5 expansion. But after that plan came out, things got quiet. And then, late last month, the committee co-chairs, Democratic Senator Chris Gorsuch and Representative Susan McLean, sent a letter to other legislative leaders with a progress report. It reiterated most of the list from the prior framework, but it added a couple more ideas that are being tossed around, including taking another stab at a legislative version of a cap-and-trade program, and maybe even winding down the DEQ emissions testing.
It's a little bit older, and as we were doing the package, we were just working on trying to see if that was something that would save money, if we could invest it in something that was more potent than that particular program, but that's about it. That's what brought our attention to it, was the fact that we think about 90%, if not more, of the cars are passing it easily because of the efficiency of the new vehicles. So that was the base reason for looking at it.
Now, Representative McLean stressed they have not committed to doing any of this yet. They're just talking about a lot of ideas. But the cap and trade part is a bit more eye-catching. Now, if that idea sounds familiar, it's probably because the legislature tried to pass a version of it in both 2019 and 2020, which triggered the infamous Republican walkouts, grinding the legislature to a halt until Democrats agreed to drop it. The idea is that the state places an upper limit on carbon emissions statewide. That's the cap. And the amount is divided into units for distribution to businesses, essentially serving as allowances to emit certain amounts of carbon pollution. Now, the cap is lowered over time and the pool of allowances shrinks, which is supposed to push companies to adopt more sustainable practices. Companies that reduce their emissions faster can bank their unused allowances for future years or sell them to other companies that pollute more. That's the trade part. Now, those previous failures to pass a program prompted former Governor Kate Brown to create her own version through executive action, resulting in the Climate Protection Program, or CPP. It was not smooth sailing for that version either. The initial rules were challenged in court and thrown out, and a new set of rules was only finalized last year. The CPP is set to take effect this year. So, with all that history behind cap and trade, it was quite the surprise to see the legislature wading back in, particularly for environmental advocacy groups who helped craft the new CPP rules.
So if you were to ask that coalition that worked really hard last summer to try and get these rules right, they'll tell you, we got it done, and we got it done in a way that makes sure that frontline communities that groups like OGT represent, to make sure that the brunt of pollution doesn't just continue disproportionately harm those communities, but the investments from CPP were there to right historic wrongs. So we're kind of confused as to why we're having this conversation about cap and trade when we spent all this time making sure that CPP was done right.
The memo didn't say much about why cap and trade is back on the table, and we didn't really get a clear answer from McLean. But here's what we've heard. First of all, businesses are not thrilled with the CPP. When we reached out to the state's largest business advocacy group, Oregon Business and Industry, they made it clear they really don't like this version of cap and trade in particular, telling us in a statement that the CPP, quote, threatens significant cost increases for businesses and consumers, imposes a draconian and inflexible emissions reduction schedule, does not align with other existing carbon markets, and is subject to little oversight from the legislative branch. They went on to say that they've been advocating for years for the CPP to be reformed or replaced. And that bit about not aligning with other existing carbon markets, that's the other factor here. Washington passed its own version of cap and trade in 2021, and it took effect in 2023. Linking the two states' carbon markets would provide more flexibility for businesses. And while the memo from Gorsuch and McLean is pretty brief, it does say that any potential CPP replacement would be designed to create that link. Even so, reopening cap and trade is going to be a touchy discussion. The memo also mentions that state revenue generated by the new cap and trade program could be spent in part on, quote, gas and diesel generated credits dedicated to the state highway fund for core operations and major projects. And that sentence immediately set off alarm bells for environmentalists.
If we put climate policy in place in the state, it has to be in service of addressing the climate crisis. Right now, households are paying a lot for climate impacts, right? Increasing heat means people are trying to scrape together air conditioning units, and air conditioning units can be really expensive to run because they can be really inefficient. Meanwhile, the state isn't putting dollars right now towards incentivizing very efficient heat pumps. And so if a climate program is put in place and resources are generated, they need to go back to addressing the root cause of the problem and help people transition off of the use of fossil fuels. Right now, what we saw rolled out, in just a couple of short bullet points last week was a proposal to use climate proceeds on projects that could actually increase emissions. And that's incredibly backwards.
Now, the memo also mentions the funds could be spent on community-based climate impact programs along the same lines as the CPP, plus wildfire mitigation efforts and support for transportation like biking and mass transit. But without an actual bill or package, we don't really know how serious this cap and trade discussion is or how it could fit into the broader transportation funding issue. There's still no official timeline for the package, but we are expecting some kind of update on Wednesday morning. The memo adds that there will be a fully transparent and public process that will help refine the proposals. But boy, will that have to be quick since there's only a few weeks left of the session. So I know that was a lot, but what do you think? Should cap and trade come back to potentially help fund transportation? Or maybe you just have thoughts about an increase to the gas tax and other fees. Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. 503-226-5090. Now, also in Salem, lawmakers have spent months trying to figure out how to pay the costs of fighting wildfires in Oregon. It's only getting more expensive over time. Last year's fire season broke records. Roughly 2 million acres burned, and the Oregon Department of Forestry ran out of money to pay the bill. So a special session had to be called in December last year to approve a $218 million bailout. Just about everyone in Salem agrees they don't want that to happen again. And they're looking for long-term solutions to pay for fire season costs. Now, one of the proposals has to do with the state's bottle bill. House Bill 3940 would impose a 5-cent surcharge on bottles and cans on top of that 10-cent deposit you already pay. But unlike the deposit, listen to this, you would not get that money back if you recycle. It would instead go toward a fund to prevent and fight fires. It's a bipartisan bill. One of the sponsors, Representative John Lively, a Democrat from Springfield, said at a public hearing last month that wildfire season is everyone's problem.
This is an issue that impacts the whole state. This is an issue that is an all Oregon problem. This isn't just an issue that deals with the landowners. It's not just an issue that deals with people responding. This issue impacts the whole state.
The bill has other features. It would draw from taxes paid by out-of-state insurance companies, make some changes to the forest harvest tax, and draw on the state's rainy day fund. But the biggest controversy seems to be around the bottle bill. Opponents say bottle recycling has no connection to fighting wildfires. Here's Representative Mark Gamba, a Democrat from Milwaukee. He voted to advance the bill out of committee, but says he did so reluctantly.
While I recognize we desperately need to have an ongoing significant funding mechanism for fires, climate-driven fires are increasing every year, bigger, faster, hotter, more expensive, more destructive, and we're going to have to pay for that. I see no nexus whatsoever with the bottle bill. There are a few things that Oregon ranks number one in this country. That is one of them. We have the model for that type of system, and I think we risk breaking that system if we include that as a way to fund wildfires.
Now, Jason Jordan, the president of the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative, which runs the bottle bill program, warns that the bill would undermine the entire system.
The current proposal to charge a 5-cent sales tax on beverages, it will harm the public perception and support of Oregon's bottle bill. For nearly 54 years, Oregonians have become accustomed to receiving a full deposit back when they can return their containers for a refund. A sales tax on top of that refund will confuse our customers and consumers, and ultimately undermining that trust and weakening the customer's desire to participate.
Now, House Bill 3940 is part of a set of bills meant to address wildfire funding. It has not had much movement since the public hearing last month. Right now, it's with the House Revenue Committee. The other sponsor, Republican Representative Bobby Levy, told our team today she's still having meetings about it and thinks it will move forward with bipartisan support. Well, coming up next on the story, 3 congresswomen from the Northwest recently made an unannounced visit to the ICE detention facility in Tacoma. What they had to say after their 2-hour visit. That's when the story returns. Well, Southwest Washington Representative Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez believes the Democratic Party has strayed too far from its roots. The Congresswoman who ran and was elected as a Democrat, defeating Republican Joe Kent, has recently received criticism over not taking a hard enough stance on some issues. Other Democrats in the district, like Brent Henrich, accused her of not upholding party values, referring to her vote in favor of the SAVE Act regarding voter registration. Henrich announced his run for Gluesenkamp-Perez's seat earlier this month. Stephanie Dolmarat recently sat down with Congresswoman Gluesenkamp-Perez for Straight Talk and asked if she still identifies with the Democratic Party.
I am a Democrat, and the reason that I'm a Democrat, I think, look, it's actually crazy to me that some of these things that have become party ideology they feel quite removed from the reasons that I'm a Democrat.
Well, Stephanie also asked about the Congresswoman's thoughts on DOJ, tariffs, and her take on President Trump's second term so far. You can watch the full episode of Straight Talk tonight at 7, right after the story, or anytime on our free TV app, KGW+. Meanwhile, 3 other congresswomen from the Northwest made a surprise visit to the ICE processing center in Tacoma Friday afternoon, where they spent more than 2 hours. Pramila Jayapal, Emily Randall, and Maxine Dexter said the purpose of the visit was to inspect conditions inside the facility that has long drawn scrutiny for how it treats detainees. The facility is funded by taxpayers. It's managed by a private company. There is a law that allows visitors without prior authorization. After meeting some pushback from staff, they were allowed in, accompanied by attorneys from the ACLU. And the congresswomen were allowed to speak with 2 detainees.
It was clear to me, at least from the 2 that we talked to, that nobody's telling them what their rights are, right, yeah. Or like they have the right to seek an interpreter. I mean, if they want an interpreter, they can ask for one, and they have to provide them with one. Mm-hmm. But nobody's telling them that because those Know Your Rights forums and legal orientation programs are not happening. I don't think that American public wants their taxpayer dollars to be going to illegally detaining people, and there are many of these people have not committed any crime. They're awaiting bond hearings. It's supposed to be. We don't call it a prison. We call it a detention center because it's supposed to be a civil detention facility. But these are essentially prisons.
The congresswoman talked about a man in the facility named Maximo Londanio, a legal permanent resident in the country for 31 years, married to a U.S. citizen with 3 children who are U.S. citizens. Now, he was detained at SeaTac last month, returning from a trip to the Philippines. He was held for days before being transferred to the facility in Tacoma. His family says he has 2 nonviolent convictions from over 20 years ago that have been resolved.
If this can happen to Maximo, who has permanent legal status, it can happen to any of us. Yeah. Due process has been turned on its head, and we are using American dollars to disrupt and undermine our justice system. And it should be something that every single one of us is absolutely horrified by and willing to stand up against. Yeah, that's right.
All right, now let's get to some of your thoughts from our big story on Friday regarding drug use inside Multnomah County libraries. A CDC report looked at 3 locations, Hollywood, Belmont, and Central in downtown Portland. The results were not pretty. 95 employees were interviewed. Just over 1/3 reported being exposed to drugs, mainly fentanyl. Some said it happened daily. 19 experienced symptoms from the exposure. Now, much of the drug use is happening inside the bathrooms. In fact, in one bathroom, a syringe was found stuck in the ceiling during the CDC inspection. Now, if caught using drugs in the library, people can be banned from all county libraries for up to 1 year. But many of your emails sounded like this one from Adrian. What about consequences for illegal drug use in general? So much money went into the renovation of this library, and there's no way that I would spend any time there, which is sad. I grew up spending time there and took my kids there, and now I'm paying taxes for something I cannot use. I sometimes feel like this city is not even trying at all. And here's what Stephen thinks should be done. Require a library card for entry to a library. It is sad that our local library now needs to have a full-time security guard to, among other tasks, monitor the bathrooms. And Linda wants to go a step further, writing, put the books in storage and have the central library be a day center for homeless people, because that is essentially what it is now. I am surrounded by people with their belongings, mentally ill, and bad smells. Allowing this library to be trashed and for the library users to not be comfortable is a picture of how the city has handled all homeless and drug problems in the city. Not good. Well, thanks everyone for your feedback. As always, keep it coming. We're back right after this. Well, welcome back. Last night, a geomagnetic storm caused the northern lights to be visible in parts of Oregon. This picture here was taken in Warm Springs, showing off some of the greens and purples in the night sky. Now, if you're just hearing about it, meteorologist Matt Zafino did make some social posts yesterday giving people a heads up. But Matt, talk to us. Do we get another chance tonight?
We do get another chance tonight, Blair. So if you've never seen him or if you haven't seen him since you were like a little kid, then you might want
Guilty.
You might want to give it a shot. It's super spectacular to see it. And the great thing about getting a geomagnetic storm this time of the year is it's a lot warmer than it is in, say, October, December, February, when we also have had some chances recently. So this picture also from the Warm Springs area. Jack England took this shot, and look at the purples there, just fantastic. The northern lights there. Here's another shot for you. This is from at Shutterbug Shaw. Jay Shaw is a photographer for the Oregonian, and he shot this, and that's his handle on Instagram. He shot this up at Crown Point last night. I mean, this is a really great picture because you get the greens and the purples. You get kind of the horizontal line and the vertical line, and then, of course, set off with Crown Point and the Vista House in the foreground. So, you know, he's a professional, but really, really great picture there, too. So, first of all, why do we even get the northern lights, right? Well, it starts with, as Blair mentioned, a geomagnetic storm, or what we also will call the solar wind, a very active solar wind, and it comes into the Earth's magnetic field. And it penetrates the Earth's magnetic field around the poles, both the north and the south, because that's where the magnetic field is the weakest. These are the magnetic field lines. I know we're getting real science and nerdy
There's
here.
lots of lines there. Whoa.
A lot of lines going on, but think of the yellow lines as like highly charged, fast-moving particles that are abnormal. The sun doesn't always put those out. And so when we get this big blast from a geomagnetic storm, then it comes into the Earth's magnetic field, and what those particles do from the sun is they hit particles in the Earth's atmosphere and they excite them, they perturb them. And so they start buzzing around even more, and that's when they produce the light. And the really cool thing about the northern lights is this. Depending on which molecules are being excited, that determines what colors you get. So for instance, red auroras means that way up high, the oxygen molecules are getting hit. Blue auroras, nitrogen molecules not quite as high. Green auroras, again oxygen, but lower down. And then pink and purple, below 100 kilometers or about 60 miles up, and those are nitrogen molecules yet again. So again, a lot of science here, but it all comes down to a really great show. So what about tonight? First of all, you really need to get away from city lights. The gorge is great anywhere out in Washington County, the coast, eastern Oregon. You don't want to be looking through a bunch of man-made light because that'll wash them out, right? Be patient, and it's not a sure thing, but the most likely time for us this time is going to be 2 to 5 a.m. That's when we think we have the best shot. Blair?
Okay, Matt, thanks so much.
You bet.
Well, that's the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Straight Talk is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air the episode at 8:30 and 10:30 on our TV app, KGW+. You can catch us the following morning at 11:30. Download that app now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. In the meantime, have a great Monday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.